Yeah, so I'm Nigel Eccles. I'm CEO and co-founder of BetHog, which is a crypto casino. I studied pure mathematics at university. I've been in the betting industry since 2000. And ever since then, I've been in and out of the betting industry for like 24 years. I think I have a mindset that likes risk and find it pretty exhilarating. One of the reasons I've always found skill games more interesting is it's a puzzle. People want to unlock it. They want to figure out a way of beating the game and beating the competition. I tend to like to bet on things where I think I might have an edge. And so I think that's one of the dangers with crypto is there's a natural tendency to make things more complicated. I think there's another problem in crypto, which is for some projects, they're deliberately complex. If they made it really, really simple, then it would be obvious to everyone that it was just a Ponzi scheme. And the industry seemed to have like a lot of promise, but not much actual product. And so we were like, what if we took that game and made it much faster and you're going to be able to play on your mobile phone? Like that was kind of the thesis. We launched it in summer of 2009 and it grew very rapidly. Like we continued to improve the product. We grew about 5x year on year for about 5 or 6 years. And then when Ethereum launched, I thought that was really interesting because...
Excellent. So who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Nigel Eccles. I do a lot of things in crypto, but the biggest one is I'm CEO and co-founder of BetHog, which is a crypto casino.
Excellent. So I want to start way back before crypto even really existed. So what was your early background? Like what were you interested in as a kid?
Oh, as a kid, whoa, you're way back.
Or a young adult.
Yeah, good. So I studied pure mathematics at university, but sort of unusually, I've always been interested in sort of probability and gambling, and so I've been in the betting industry since 2000 in the UK initially. So I was with a company called Flutter.com. It's now Flutter Entertainment. We launched a person-to-person betting site in 2000. We merged with Betfair. And ever since then, I've been in and out of the betting industry for like 24 years.
Right. So you had an early entrepreneurial venture called HubDub, is that correct?
Yeah.
So that was an early prediction market.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that
venture?
venture?
So we launched HubDub in 2007. I was always sort of interested in prediction markets as a way to kind of quantify the news, and like all the reasons we're excited about it today. And so, yeah, we launched HubDub in 2007. It was perfect because the 2008 election was pretty electric. It was Obama versus McCain. And so we timed it really well. We got a ton of interest. We couldn't easily process payments, so we actually did it as a free product. It was like a sort of ad-supported free product. And what we had was through 2008, every month, very, very strong month-on-month growth and engagement. November 5th rolls around, and then November 6th, and it's then went into straight decline.
Right. It's interesting, like there's so much attention right now being an election cycle in the US. Like I feel like that's one of the reasons that Polymarket has gained traction that people don't talk about as much.
Oh yeah, like without a doubt. It's the US election, if you exclude sports and financial markets or really separate verticals, the US election is the most interesting thing or the most relevant market by about 100x to the next one, right? And if you look at Polymarket, the data backs it up. Of the top 20 markets, 19 of them are election. And the other markets, they just don't stack up. You don't have... the market this is something that everyone or nearly everyone in the US has got an interest in, that people want to trade, that there's daily information, and it's a binary event, like one or the other, and there's no debate over who won. Other things, they tend not to be as binary, like even like I could give you lots of questions that are really interesting, like which will be the winning L2 in Ethereum? Like it's an interesting question. It seems binary, but then how do we define it? And then how long is it going to take? It's going to take 3-5 years. And so all these questions that sort of seem interesting kind of become less interesting. They're just very hard to turn into a market.
And it's interesting because I think some of the kind of criticism Polymarket experiences right now is around like deciding outcomes.
Right. Yes. So some of those I think are sort of teething errors. Like those are those are things I think they work through. So, like, for example, we had a case in 2008, which was Elliot Spitzer, who was governor of New York, and we had a market on whether he would resign by a certain date. He did, but effective like 2 weeks later. So he said, I resign effective. And so unfortunately that was over our cutoff. And then so we're like, what's the answer? And so then we built sort of case law. And I think Polymark is doing that as well. And so those are sort of somewhat fixable. The unfixable ones are like, how do you quantify a lot of these stories? Like, how do I turn them into like a clear yes or no in a way that aligns with the market? And those mostly I think are unfixable. Like they're the most sort of stories, they don't resolve cleanly into an A or a B. And then, you know, if you go through like the sort of headlines of most news stories, they're not clear cut outside of elections.
Right.
Yeah.
So then elections become like a killer use case.
They become the killer use case. And unfortunately, fortunate to be honest, they only happen every 4 years. And so I think Polymarket have done an amazing job. They are by far the best prediction market we've seen. They've done a really nice execution on payments, on interface, on user experience. But they definitely are going to see like a dramatic, I would say at least 80%, potentially 90% retrenchment post this year or post the election. But, you know, they can still sustain from that, but it's not, you know, this is not something that goes up and to the right. This is like, they should use this initial momentum to sort of build out a product in other verticals. And then every 4 years, we're going to be really excited about it.
So what to you was interesting about like probabilities, prediction markets, gambling, especially, you know, right when you were getting into it? What made you so curious about the space?
What of it? Like, part of it is I just love gambling as a format. Like, I just find it very entertaining. I think I have a mindset that likes risk and find it pretty exhilarating. But I also like the underlying mechanics of it, and so understanding both from a probability perspective, but also from the psychology perspective of like, you know, how would you bet in a casino? If you're betting, you know, if you were playing blackjack, you just go in and bet $10 a hand. Well, actually, it's sometimes more fun if you're betting $10. Something I sometimes do. It's called a reverse martingale, which is
I saw you tweeting about that. Yeah.
So a martingale is typically one where you bet $1, and if you lose, you bet $2, and if you lose again, you bet $4. And at the end of every series is it where you win $1, right? Because I would lose 1, then 2, then 4, then I'd win 8. You net out the 7, I win $1. So people think, oh, this is a surefire way to make money.
Right.
The problem is that, you know, in 50-50 bets, like you can have a string of 15 reds or 18 reds. And by that stage, you've hit the casino maximum or you've hit your bankroll maximum, right? So it's a strategy that earns a little bit of money all the time or most of the time, and then every so often loses everything, right? So it's actually psychologically a terrible strategy. Like, it's a good, really boring upside and terrifying downside. Something that I think is a more fun strategy, which is more of a sort of a flat bet, and then you increase the bet when you're winning, which means, you enjoy betting, it's fun, you're flat betting, but then you have moments of excitement when you're like, suddenly you get a lot of money on the line. And I actually think that's a kind of more fun casino strategy. Now, it doesn't change the odds of the game. If you're playing blackjack and the effective margin of the casino is maybe like minus 0.5%, it's still minus 0.5%, but it makes it a more fun experience.
I guess something that I've never thought about too, like around Polymarket or election betting, is like you have this time frame where the odds are changing. So it's almost like trading. I mean, it really is like trading an asset. And obviously Polymarket says like shares in a bet, where it's like, if I put the money down on the money line for the Green Bay Packers tonight or whatever, then, you know, I'm not trading that event, but like I can make money even on a losing bet or something.
So definitely. But people have been trading sports for years. Like in the UK, we've had Betfair since 2000. and a lot of people have traded it. They see something that they think is underpriced, and they will buy in, but they will sell before the settlement. Or very classically, people will arbitrage. So they'll see, okay, it's priced here on Betfair and here on a book, and so they will do that arb. One of the challenges is that sports books typically don't like that, because it hits their margin, and so they often will limit users if they think if they're arbing.
Right. So you kind of got in at the beginning of this macro trend of like online betting.
Yeah.
Did you have a long-term conviction on that? Were you kind of like fundamentally convinced that this was going to be the start of this big trend?
Like, what I would say is it just made a ton of sense to me that that sports betting would go online. Like like in the UK in sort of 2000, it's been legal in the UK since the 1960s, betting, particularly on horse racing.
Right.
At the time it was in like bookmaker shops, and they were on the high street, or telephone betting. And it just made so much more sense to me that it would be on the internet or laterally on your phone. And once we had, in fact, even in 2003, we were working on early mobile betting applications, and it just sort of was like, yeah, this is the future. Like, this is the way that people are going to bet. And so yeah, we saw a huge opportunity for the existing market, but opening up a whole new market where people that maybe they didn't want to go down to bookmakers, which at the time they weren't very, particularly pleasant places.
Right.
But if you could just bet on your phone, that's going to be a lot better.
And then did you have kind of like, obviously gambling has existed for as long as we've been throwing like animal bones around. But is there any reason you were specifically interested in kind of like betting markets versus kind of betting games, I guess is?
So historically, I've tended to be more interested in games of skill. So sports betting is definitely a game of skill. They tend to be more games of skill and chance. So like I like poker.
Right.
I like poker. I really like chess, but chess is not a great game for betting because...
That's so funny you say this, because I talked to Haseeb Qureshi yesterday, prolific crypto VC, and he has a poker background, and he actually made the same comparison around poker and chess.
Yeah, so chess is not a great betting game because, if you're better than me, you will beat me, right? Nearly all of the time. Poker has much more chance elements in it, and so it's a better betting game. It is a very good betting game, but a lot of the products that I've really liked are like sports betting or daily fantasy, where there's a lot of chance involved, but the skill can give you the edge. And the interesting thing about skill games is, one of the ways I describe it is, there's not many people want to be on the front cover of Slot Gamer Monthly, right? And why is that? As well, because you're not viewed as a winner, you're not a hero. But being on the front cover of being a poker pro, that's a cool thing. And so that's one of the reasons I've always found skill games more interesting is it's a puzzle. People want to unlock it. They want to figure out a way of beating the game and beating the competition. That's kind of more interesting to me, those types of games historically, than games of pure chance.
Absolutely. And do you do speculation, betting, and prediction market yourself?
Pretty much all of them.
Wow.
All of the above. So yeah, I like to bet on elections. I similarly, like I tend to like to bet on things where I think I might have an edge. I'm pretty good at deluding myself that I have an edge. But I will. So I like crypto. I like any markets. I did bet I have existing bets in the US election. Daily fantasy, I was, obviously very interested in. I'm not good enough at poker. I play it, but I'm not good enough to really spend a lot of, invest a lot into it. But yeah, any of the above where I think that I can convince myself that I have some sort of edge, I will invest and bet.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of poker players did end up in crypto, and I think part of it is the fact that a lot of poker players use casinos that would pay out in crypto
Right.
and onboard that way. But there's also a kind of famous case of someone who played a lot of political betting markets, GCR, you know, the famous like FTX leader in trading. And he, I think, was originally a political bettor. So it's interesting that both of these kind of like gambling games of skill have, you know, attracted.
Well, they're all like, you know, they're all very classic, you know, places where like you can be EV positive, right?
Right.
And so that it attracts the same mindset. It's typically they're young, male, risk seeking. So the demographics are almost identical. I'm almost surprised when I meet somebody in poker that is not into crypto, because I'm like, wow, it's the same thing, right? So I there's a very, very high overlap.
So you mentioned a little bit about daily games,
Daily fantasy sports.
Daily fantasy sports. Yeah. Can you tell us about a little bit about your venture FanDuel?
Yeah. So 2009. This was post the election. Interested in prediction markets really died off, like that I would expect will happen 2025 as well. And so we realized that this wasn't a growth engine. And so we pivoted, and the team that we basically launched FanDuel. HubDub became FanDuel.
Right.
FanDuel, we looked at the US market. We saw that we couldn't do sports betting. We couldn't do like prediction markets for real money. And so we were like, we looked at what we could do, and one thing we could do was fantasy sports. But at the time, and still today, traditional fantasy sports, it's quite a slow game. You know, like with football, it'll start in August, or you know, it resolves in December. The prizes are pretty small. You couldn't play on your phone, and so we were like, what if we took that game and made it much faster? And we said, okay, you can play on a weekend or in a day. We're going to have real prizes, and you're going to be able to play on your mobile phone. Like that was kind of the thesis. And that's what FanDuel was. We launched it in summer of 2009, and it grew very rapidly. Like we continued to improve the product. We grew about 5x year on year for about 5 or 6 years. And so we were sort of massive growth. And basically, it became the platform of which, whenever sports betting was legalized in the US in 2018, that we basically built FanDuel what it is today. So, you know, it was a DFS product. This is a product that had millions of users, but it was doing by 2017, it was doing about 150 million in revenue. Wow. Last year, FanDuel did around 5 billion in revenue. That's insane. So, but that was kind of the bedrock of what FanDuel was built on, which was this daily fantasy sports product.
Well, it's interesting that you say like it was kind of a reinvention, and I mean maybe even beyond a reinvention, like a new format for, you know, games, prizes, speculation, however you want to classify it, and how that carries over to crypto now, because like I think we're in a space where a lot of people say crypto really needs something new. Like when you think about consumer apps, it's like we can't just imitate or build the same stuff on chain. Like we have to actually create something novel here. And the fact that FanDuel was such a novel format is an interesting, you know, how did you guys arrive at that via ideation, or was it just kind of lightning struck?
So like we weren't, even we weren't, there were some other operators in this space. There was a lot of ideas of how you would make fantasy sports better. I think one of the things that we brought to the space was, it's funny, it was kind of almost like we were all British, so we didn't actually, we didn't live in the US, and hadn't been playing fantasy sports for 20 years. But what that meant was that we really wanted to simplify it and sort of go like, if we understand it, whereas a lot of the other applications in the space were making it more complicated.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the dangers with crypto is there's a natural tendency to make things more complicated.
I totally
And
agree.
then consumers turn up and they're like, I have no idea how to use this, or why I would use it. And so I think that's one of the things that we did that made it really successful. In fact, I remember one of the first screens with FanDuel, we made it mirror the Yahoo fantasy page because we knew that the concept was a little bit complex because before you had to play for an entire season. We were saying you only could play on one day. And we said, well, let's make the screen the same so people feel more comfortable with it. And that's what we did. So, yeah, they're definitely, I think we looked at some of the things. We definitely thought about what are the things were wrong with fantasy sports. We looked at what other people were doing. And we sort of said, well, that I don't understand. Let's try and make it simple. And we spent a lot of time with users trying to get their feedback and how we made that sort of core experience better and sort of simpler to understand.
What's interesting, this concept you key in on of like kind of being outsiders to the fantasy space, because I think there might be some, psychological bias term for this, but like in crypto, I see what happens a lot is like, people will get into crypto and they'll be accessible and they'll have they'll be able to explain it and the value proposition, and then they'll get more and more granular and more intelligent on the space, and then they'll invent something that's like a MEV market on the cross chain arbitrages or whatever, and it ends up not being accessible or not understandable to the average user. And I think like outsiders are advantaged, especially when it comes to consumer, because they're more focused on like the core value prop of crypto than, someone who's like here because of they're ideologically involved with crypto, and then they're trying to build something on crypto because of that.
I think there's another problem in crypto, which is, we've seen this a lot, which simplicity for some projects, they're deliberately complex. There's like a complexity theater, right? Like, which is, if they made it really, really simple, then it would be obvious to everyone that was just a Ponzi scheme, right? Like, it's like, why do I have to buy this other NFT and then put this other NFT on top of it? And then once you've figured it out, you're like, oh, because it's basically a Ponzi, right? Like, it's if we had made it simple, like if remember Olympus and all its forks, like I remember spending days trying to get my head around it. So we bond with this and then we do with this on top. And I was like, and trying to figure out what was the bit I was missing. And then I'm like, oh, I'm not missing anything. It really is just like it is a giant Ponzi. But if they had simplified it to the extent that it would never have worked. And I think that's a kind of an issue we often see. Like, we see projects that do one thing, but then they launch an NFT, collection, and then their value accrued to the NFTs, and you're like, but why are we doing this? Like, and that's, I think, is just an enemy of crypto, of this sort of complexity theater.
I think in like 2022, I kind of came around on the idea that like, value cannot be created out of tokenomics in the long term, right? Like maybe you can create some artificial pump using unique, value accrual, but
it's these sort of supply games. I think they sometimes defer the inevitable, which is like, okay, we're going to change the supply game around, and it'll give that short-term pump, but the end point is still zero, and so. Yeah, like that. We do see that a lot in crypto.
Yeah. So I'm keying into a couple kind of things that kind of set the stage for your involvement in crypto, right? And you mentioned one, the issue with kind of like fiat on ramps.
Yeah.
Right? What else? What brought you into crypto? Or I guess when did you start to get curious about crypto?
So I got into, I actually remember in 2017, like when I first learned about Ethereum. Like, obviously I knew about Bitcoin before that, but I never had a lot of money, and I never really thought it was that interesting. I thought it was interesting, but not something I was like, I didn't think it was much to do. You bought it, and then you talked to other people who had bought it, and you convinced yourself it was going to go up in value, which I'm like, that doesn't sound very interesting. And then when Ethereum launched, I thought that was really interesting because the idea of creating a world computer, of creating decentralized applications, I thought that was really fascinating. And I remember in 2017, like going through pretty much every token in the coin market cap and just scratching my head about what any of them did. And sort of by the end of 2017, I was like, this is not ready for consumer. Like I like building consumer applications. I was like, there's no way. Like the only one at the time I think was CryptoKitties, and I remember trying to buy one and sort of realizing it was desperately difficult. So in 2020, I got back into it. I actually thought that NBA Top Shot and a Nifty Gateway, both great consumer applications, and kind of surprising that was 2020, and we don't really have the same thing today. Like they still exist, but they don't have that same sort of culture phenomena. I had a sports card business, so the idea of sports collectibles was like absolutely made sense to me.
Right.
And so they got me back into it, and then I got into quite heavily into social crypto. So did some work on building an application on BitCloud, if you remember that,
right.
Which was interesting. And then started doing a lot of work building applications on Solana from 2021.
In that 2017 crop, like when you were first analyzing Ethereum, was there anything interesting around consumer or?
CryptoKitties, I think, was pretty much the only thing. Like everything was much more, even the discussion was much more about like infrastructure and finance, and like it was. There wasn't much you could do, in 2017.
Right, yeah, you could buy an ICO or whatever.
You could buy Ethereum and you could hold it, but there wasn't anything you could do with it, certainly that I could see. And the industry seemed to have like a lot of promise, but not much actual product.
So is there any particular reason that you ended up in Solana as kind of a consumer focus?
Yeah, like in 2021, if you wanted to build consumer products, like it had to be fast and cheap. And Solana wasn't just sort of fast and cheap there. Fast and cheap was part of its ethos. Like there was no way that I felt in the future that Tolly would stand up and say, yeah, like we know that transactions are taking a few, 3 to 4 minutes and they're costing like several dollars, but that's okay. Right? That would there was no way. It was absolutely core to their DNA was that it had to be fast and cheap. And so I'm like, well, if I'm making a multi-year bet on a chain, that's the chain that I want, the one that it's part of their DNA to be fast and cheap. Ethereum was 100% not, it was never going to be, in my view, like it just wasn't going to work for consumer. And so there was a very easy decision then. I think there's more competition now. There's definitely more competition now, particularly from the L2s. But I think that Solana has done an excellent job in the last 3 years of just building the infrastructure, and that's DEXs, that's wallets, that's fiat on and off ramps, and just the other consumer applications that they have a very strong ecosystem that just being fast and cheap isn't enough anymore. They also have that whole ecosystem that I still think it is the best place for anyone building consumer applications.
Right. Plus they have, this kind of intellectual capital of people who have come to build consumer on Solana. And I think that's a huge advantage because it's kind of a mental shortcut for other people curious about building for consumers in crypto. Yeah. And they can just kind of say, okay, well, Helium is already here, so there must be this must be good enough. Right?
Yeah. I think and I think there's probably less risk. Like if, for example, like another chain that I think is interesting is Blast, and there's been quite a lot of consumer applications on it, and it's one where but there is chain risk. Post TGE. They saw a massive drop off in activity. And so as a developer on it, I'm like, oh, I'm actually taking risk here. Right. And if you're a serious consumer application developer, there's no amount of incentives that a chain can give you that you should be interested in. If you really want to be long-term successful, you have to choose the chain that you think is going to be long-term successful. Going with another chain because they're giving you money is a terrible decision. I don't know anyone who's ever been successful through that route. You need to end up with the one that is the right one, is going to be a successful chain.
Right. Plus, if you look at any app that's like ended up on a dying chain
Yeah.
that's had any remote level of success, they're immediately going to some other platform.
Exactly.
So that kind of brings us around to BetHog. So what was the idea there, and why were you convicted on building that?
Yeah. So like the way I look at it is one of the things that crypto is incredible at, which in a way it doesn't really get much kudos for, is payments. And one of the places where that's most apparent is actually in online casinos. Having been in the betting industry for 24 years, payments is one of your biggest issues. So basically, what do you know, like, and people don't really think about it, but in online betting, I have to, if I want to process payments, I have to get an acquiring bank. I have to get a payment gateway. I have to get, I have to get a legal opinion. And I have to put together all this infrastructure in every market that I operate in. So if I'm operating in Indonesia or New Zealand, I have to basically get this all spun up. Even if I get this all spun up, which is incredibly time consuming, I also have to incur the cost of it, including things like chargeback. So user comes in, classic the thing that happens in gaming, loses a ton of money. Next day they decide, you know what, I don't really want to pay that. So they go to their credit card company and say, that wasn't me.
Right.
That falls on the merchant, right? And there's not really much the merchant can do about that. They just have to eat that cost. And so with crypto, you obviously solves this issue. And even, dealing with that all in, payments can take up something like 12% to 20% of your revenue, right? That's just eating up in payments. With Apple, it's 30%, like if you're an app on the App Store. So with crypto, I can have instant payments at almost no cost. And additionally, we have these huge number of people who have around 2 trillion in assets sitting around, which even today they don't have really that much to do. Like, it's not like there's so many demands on what you can do with your Sol and ETH.
Right.
And so crypto has this availability, and it also solves the payments issue. And so that's why I was looking at it and saying, this is just a great space. The other thing that we when we looked at the market is, there's a lot of really good operators in sort of crypto casino space, but there hasn't been that much innovation in the games. If you look at the games on a lot of these platforms, they haven't really changed over the last 10 or 15 years. You still have the very sort of traditional slot games. And so we thought, well, we can invest in building better games. And that's really what we've been doing.
So talk about that a little bit. Like, where have you innovated there, and what's most interesting or most successful?
There's sort of two areas that we're looking to innovate. The one area is making the games much more visual and much better for streaming. So a lot of user acquisition comes now through like Kick or on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah.
And again, the games just look like the boring slot games. We're like, what if we actually sort of thought about designing those games from the ground up to make them more visually attractive and exciting for the audience? So that's the first one. Second one is, no one's really done that much in terms of games of skill. And so two of the titles we have today are games of chance and skill. And we're looking at other games to add into the mix that are games of skill.
So isn't one of the issues with a game of skill, especially on like an open crypto platform, the issue that like casinos, for advantage players, they can kick them out, right? So.
Right, yes. So, games of skill typically are PvP. So they're not against the house.
Okay.
So we have a couple of games. One is a trading game. So you're actually, everyone's putting in $10 or $20 and you're trading against everyone else. And so that's a game of skill. We don't have any risk because we basically take 1% of the pot and we distribute the pot to the winner. But yes, that is, if you're doing against the house, that's something you would have to manage.
And then maybe a skeptic would come in and say like, okay, cool. Fundamentally, you're building the platform perhaps just because it's kind of more regulatorily it has more regulatory friendliness. Or maybe not even that, but just it's a Reg Arb, right?
Well, not really. We geo-block the US and other like Western Europe countries that we wouldn't be in compliance with the law. So we will do that. We're not, there are some casinos out there that will take players from the US or UK. That's not us. So we do geo-block those countries. What we do more is we make payments that much more easy. Like there's a lot of people in these countries and other countries that can bet offshore, but it's actually very hard to get their money offshore, right? And so that's, I think, one of the big areas that crypto helps, which is they can actually go and bet.
One of the questions I have about betting markets is we've seen like you guys aren't the first crypto casino. There's been plenty of crypto casinos
before. Going all the way back to the start of Bitcoin.
Right. However, a lot of these crypto casinos aren't actually kind of conventionally crypto projects where they don't launch a token, they don't give the user an opportunity to kind of own part of the upside of the success of the business. Why is that? And do you think that's going to change in the future?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons is that they have been so profitable, they haven't needed to.
Right.
They just were like Satoshi dies really early on, or like Stake does about $3 billion in revenue.
Right.
Very, very profitable, very successful. Doesn't need to.
You could even argue like Pump That Fund is this way, right? Where they're printing millions a day.
Why would we launch a token? And I also think when you see people that are launching the token and they don't have product market fit, like it's like it's if they think launching the token is the end point. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think with a lot of these casinos, we've seen Stake be very successful. We've seen newer ones since then, like Rollbit or Shuffle, where they've used the token to be a very successful marketing device.
Right.
And that to me is, after payments, the second thing that I think crypto is exceptional about, which is really kind of community formation, which is, like if someone is using a product that they are like Stake, for example, they maybe feel part of the Stake community. But if they own, like say, for example, in Shuffle, if they own the Shuffle token, then they are 100% part of the community because they share some of the upside and they feel part of it. And so that to me that's what we want to do, because we definitely want to bring the users along and actually feel that they're part of it. And I think that's something that crypto can uniquely do.
So when you talk about these characteristics that made you decide to build on crypto, do you see this for the betting industry as equally as inevitable as when you came on originally and you were looking at the internet and saying, okay, mobile, internet?
Yes. So, well, I think that like it's actually just an interesting question. I would say that I think there was early on in 21, we had a lot of discussion about whether real world assets would be tokenized and brought over to blockchain, right? So like you might take this luxury watch and then you mint an NFT and it's a claim on that luxury asset. That didn't really happen. And actually what I sort of feel is happening instead is we're creating new assets that are purely digital assets. And I think what we will see is the total value, which is somewhere around 2 trillion today, is going to massively increase, right? What is gold is something like a $20 trillion asset. I think we're more and more living in a digital world, and in that digital world, more and more of these assets are going to be digital assets, and those are going to be crypto assets. So I definitely see that. As more and more assets become that, then more and more of the gambling economy is going to be connected to that. And given that crypto is the easiest way to transact and just gives people like privacy, like people, so for example, like people do have experience, like in the UK, for example, when you go to a sports book, they will want to show proof of funds. They'll want bank statements. Like it's incredibly intrusive, and I think people when they're gambling, they don't want them to like be looking at their bank statement. They want to have, that's my money. I want to go and do what I want with it. And so I do think that we're going to see more and more people using crypto because it's their assets. Uniquely, they know what, don't have to ask third parties whether that it's appropriate. So I do think we're going to see a massive growth in crypto gambling.
So you're kind of an advocate too for this idea of like we need more of a crypto economy, we need more consumer applications. I think there's also a take where you say, okay, this is just an extension of what we already know, which is that crypto is great for speculation. Is there room for consumer beyond speculation?
I think so. Yes, absolutely. I do think that, and speculation is not a negative thing. In fact, whenever we see new technologies, like going back to like, you know, a great example, railroads, right? Like there are tons of speculation, huge amount of capital formation. A lot of it didn't work out, but it built the railroads, right? And then, you know, other industries. We saw that in the late 90s with .coms and internet companies. Like a lot of it didn't work out, but it built, you know, that was when Amazon was formed, and then slightly later with Google. And a bunch of these, you know, incredibly successful companies that, you know, it created all the fiber that everyone sort of, you know, it funded all the fiber. So I think we see that here. So we're seeing a lot of this capital formation. I guess the open question is this capital formation then being productive, you know, or is it just going around like a shitcoin casino?
Right.
That's the open question, and I don't have the answer for that. But I definitely see some great products. Like there are some really good consumer products today. You know, I'd love to see a lot more. You know, over the next few years.
Speaking of the shitcoin casino, Pump.fun has been kind of a standout product over the last 6 months, and that's kind of a crypto native form factor, right? Do you see those guys as your competitors, or is it collaborative, or is it a different thing?
No, I don't think they're competitive. I think they're a really interesting product. Like it's interesting. One way to look at Pump.fun is they were out there trying to solve the fair launch problem. And they actually did a lot to make, you know, there was no insider rounds. There was no, you know, pre-seeds. They built something that would create a fairer launch. Now it's been bought to hell, and so every time you do it, the scammers find a way kind of get around it.
Right.
But they've built something that's really interesting. I don't think that it is the last product in that. You know, if we think of the world of thinking about fair launches and launching these new platforms that allow it, I do think there are going to be more products that are going to have maybe fairer launches. So I think that's going to be interesting. I think that people love moonshots, and I don't think that's going away. You know, that, you know, this one, could it be the next whiff? Could it be the next bonk? I think they also love the community aspect to it. Like they are now part of this coins community, right? And I don't think that's to be underrated. Meme coins are definitely not going away. Like if we look at the 2022 to 23 bear market, like the major coins like Doge and SHIB, like definitely they dropped a lot, but they didn't die.
Right.
So that told me that even in the deepest bear market, they didn't die, they persisted. And so, you know, I look at the meme coins today, and if it was another bear market, I think there's certain, like, you know, bonk would definitely persist, whiff would persist. So I think meme coins are really interesting, and I think people will always be interested in ways of launching new meme coins. So I think Pump's going to be really interesting, but I think that space in general is going to be really interesting in terms of innovation.
You talk about that moonshot idea and like the fact that in crypto we see 100x's and 1000x's. In betting, it isn't necessarily that way, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's an issue for bringing people to, you know, in crypto to crypto casinos?
Like I think people some people do things for different reasons. So one of the things about crypto casinos is like, it is very much an entertainment product, so for pure chance-based products, people are doing it for entertainment, right? I don't think they're putting their kids' trust fund or, in, or they certainly shouldn't be, right? And I'm not sure they're doing that with crypto either, but they definitely sometimes are like convincing themselves that they're a trader, right?
And we see people put their entire net worth on Dogecoin.
And that's not a smart move. But I think people who are risk seeking and are trading, like, they also will go and play, blackjack, and they'll play, if they want to unwind, they'll just go and bet. So I think people who are have risk-seeking behaviors do it in other places. So traders will also go to the casino, right? Because they just like the buzz and the action and the excitement.
Yeah, you see like poker players playing baccarat or
right,
whatever.
Yes. Yeah. So like even though they know it's like EV negative, they'll still play it because, they like the action and the variance. So I've never really seen it as competitive. I think it's, like one like traders, this is what you do during the day and you go to the casino at night. Like that's how I kind of view it. It's like slightly different behaviors from the same people.
With the benefit of hindsight of many years kind of in the industry and seeing many evolutions and seeing the tech evolve into a way that, unlocks new form factors and new possibilities, looking forward 5-10 years, what do you think the space will look like in terms of consumer apps?
Ooh, I definitely, the one area that's kind of surprised me we've not seen more innovation really is in the wallet side. And I think Solana has been really blessed with Phantom Wallet, which I think is an incredibly good wallet. But to me, I find wallets weird in that, like, we expect consumers to study and learn good wallet security and behaviors, but we do things like go, oh, okay, here's your wallet, and here is the thing that you'll just go and use to like buy small transactions. But also, if you click the wrong thing, you also where you might keep all your savings, and if you click on the wrong link, all your savings are gone, right? And so we don't discriminate. Wallets don't seem to naturally discriminate between, this is just like your wallet, like where you keep small change, and here's your savings account.
Right.
They look exactly the same. And it's up to the user to like build their own like security infrastructure to make sure that, they don't screw up. And even people who are really smart and really into crypto, every so often, have get scammed and suffer horrific losses. That to me is bizarre. Like, that should just not happen. And so that's one area that I sort of think in 5 years' time, like, when you go and set up a wallet, do you have, I put out this idea. It's like, why, when you set up a wallet, do you not have basically one wallet that can interface with any other, and then you have a second wallet that it can only interface with the first wallet. So like, you couldn't, that's right. And that's your savings account. And it can't touch anything. All it can ever do is move money into your checking account. Like, I didn't go to the sort of technical detail, but like something like that has security built in. That to me is just kind of like an obvious thing. Like, we're just not going to get to mass adoption where, for example, if somebody loses their password, it's all gone, right? Like, we need to have much more appropriate security. Like, I kind of joke that with crypto is not going to go mass market through self-custody. It would be equivalent to thinking 100 years ago that cars will go mass market when everyone's an engineer or everyone's a mechanic, right? You have to know how to fix your car because they break down all the time. Cars became mass market when they became so reliable that you didn't need to be a mechanic. I think that's true with crypto, which is whenever the basic infrastructure, like wallets, of which is probably the most important one, becomes so simple to use that mass, consumers just go, yeah, no, it's super easy. I just on even my bank, I just put money into this wallet and I can go and buy stuff anywhere.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about seed phrase and I don't have to worry about losing all my money. That's kind of where that is one area I think would have the biggest impact of getting kind of more mass adoption.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing would be on the pool side, which is why were people going to use it. And that's going to have to be unique applications that I can only do with crypto. Polymarket's done an incredible job with election betting because I have to get crypto to get it. We're going to need a lot more of that to get people to go through the effort of getting crypto to come and use it.
Any specific verticals there that you can call out?
Well, I think gambling's definitely a big one. I think I still think gaming, sort of not real money gambling, but gaming is one that it's got such a natural overlap with crypto. We're still waiting for that really breakthrough game and I still think there are many that could be there.
Right.
I think we will still see a continued digitization of assets so that, in time, people will more and more treat digital assets like they do physical assets. Obviously, NFTs are in a horrible bear market at the moment, but I still, it's not that I'm necessarily bullish on 2021 NFTs, but I'm bullish on digital assets having value. No, this is valuable, this is rare, and people ascribe value to it, and it sustains that value.
Impossible to sum up years of entrepreneurship in just 60 seconds or 30 seconds, but if you were talking to someone who's trying to found a consumer app or who's working in crypto, thinking about starting their own thing, what is kind of a piece of advice you might give that person?
The key thing in consumer is the consumer, right? And is really, really understanding that customer, why they do something, what they do and why they do it. At every successful business I've been in consumer business, I've always been very close to the consumer in being a customer of the product myself, and just using it and understanding it and trying to figure out and always talking to users and getting their feedback on how you make it better. That's kind of the ultimate cheat code, which is getting feedback from them. And one of the problems I definitely think in crypto is too often we've sort of got lost behind the technology and not actually spend time talking to the customer and understand why they use it and building for them.
I think that's a phenomenal takeaway for crypto. Nigel, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Excellent.